Welcome to Crossroads. Big news. Fentanyl has now been designated a weapon of mass destruction. They have WMDs in Mexico, in other words. This is a new designation from the White House itself. It says the shift, basically, it's designed to have kind of sweeping impacts across the board, and we'll have to see what they do with it. A lot going on with that. Also, speaking of President Donald Trump in the White House, the Department of Justice under former President Joe Biden, it turns out when they raided Trump's home at Mar-a-Lago ahead of the 2024 elections, they did so without actual proper legal backing. And it's raising some questions over, well, what was the legal background of doing that and why was it done if it was done illegally? That's going to be a very big deal we'll get into. Also, on another topic, Mexico has been dumping raw sewage into American waters and has now agreed to at least take steps to stop dumping raw sewage into American waters. Now, I'll be talking about these topics and a lot more today. Make sure to hit the like button, leave a comment. Let's get started. Now, first of all, fentanyl is now an official designated WMD. It's a weapon of mass destruction. And the shift in designation could actually have pretty sweeping impacts on law enforcement, international actions, and other policies related to how the drug is treated. This is serious. It basically puts fentanyl on nuclear weapon status, meaning Mexico now has weapons of mass destruction, Venezuela now has weapons of mass destruction, and the big question is, what will America do about these weapons of mass destruction, which they are actively trying to send into the United States to kill American citizens? This is a big deal. Basically, they can take very strong actions now to stop traffickers and dealers. This is President Donald Trump explaining it. Watch this.
That's why today I'm taking one more step to protect Americans from the scourge of deadly fentanyl flooding into our country. With this historic executive order I will sign today, we're formally classifying fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction, which is what it is. No bomb does what this is doing. 200 to 300,000 people die every year that we know of. So we're formally classifying fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction.
The White House also released a fact sheet detailing the change in policy. Here's what they said. Defending America from a chemical weapon. Today, President Donald J. Trump signed an executive order designated illicit fentanyl and its core precursor chemicals, which come from China, by the way, as weapons of mass destruction. It says the order directs the Attorney General to immediately pursue criminal charges, sentencing enhancements, and sentencing variances in fentanyl trafficking cases. Meaning, if you get caught with fentanyl now, you're going to have a really bad time. You're going to have a really bad time. It's like if you had Ebola. It's like if you were trafficking Ebola. That is the kind of sentencing you could expect. I mean, if the judges actually do it, we'll see. But this is a major update with this. Now, it says the order directs the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Treasury to pursue appropriate actions against relevant assets and financial institutions for those involved in or supporting the manufacture, distribution, and sale of illicit fentanyl and its core precursor chemicals. Why does that matter? Well, guess which country distributes, manufactures the core precursor chemicals? Well, China. Guess which organizations are involved with that? Some of China's main centralized banks actually do the money laundering for the cartels. If the U.S. Treasury takes action on this scale, it could mean massive financial punishment on China. I mean, we've yet to see what they're going to do with it, but this could be more than the 10% tariffs Trump is talking about for Canada and Mexico and China, which again was the existing policy. This could be much more. Now, it says the order directs the Secretary of War and Attorney General to determine whether the Department of War, the Pentagon, should provide enhanced national security resources to the Justice Department as necessary during an emergency situation involving a weapon of mass destruction. Now, in what way would the Pentagon provide enhanced national security resources to the DOJ? So, of course, the Department of Justice handling the cases, bringing the charges, doing investigations. I doubt you'd have like armed guards around like investigators. Very likely what this will likely be, Department of Justice will probably get military intelligence to help with their investigations. My take on what this means. It could, at the more extreme end, represent criminal cases being in military courts. And we'll see if they take it that far, but you might see like court-martial type systems being used for this. Now it says the order directs the Secretary of War in consultation with the Secretary of Homeland Security to update their chemical incident response related directives to include the fentanyl threat, meaning if they encounter fentanyl, intercede wherever, it's basically listed on par with, like, again, someone smuggling Ebola. It says the order directs the Secretary of Homeland Security to identify fentanyl smuggling networks using WMD and non-proliferation related threat intelligence. Non-proliferation, literally in terms of like nuclear weapons. They're going to be looking for fentanyl on the scale of searching for nuclear weapons through the Department of Homeland Security and working, of course, with them on this. This is a huge update. You know, they've just started it. We'll have to see what enforcement looks like. But this is a huge update in terms of going after the cartels, going after the corrupt businesses, maybe even going after some foreign governments that are protecting this. It's a big controversy right now. Trump, as we've seen, has been blowing up these drug boats, you know, these Venezuelan drug boats. Department of War, Pete Hegseth, they're now saying they're going to stop posting those videos. I've been saying for a while they either need to go for more clarity or less clarity. Either stop posting the videos or start like really explaining yourself, because a lot of the public isn't buying it. Right now, though, the Trump administration, they have surrounded Venezuela with U.S. warships. And those of you who watch the show, I've been telling you this is going to happen. I told you it's not just about drugs, it's about oil. It's also about the Pax Americana and about the Monroe Doctrine. Trump is now saying they're going to basically put a full stop, no imports, no exports on any kind of oil coming out of Venezuela. And he's also talking about Venezuela returning to the United States stolen land, stolen oil, stolen assets. My assumption is he's referring to the oil rights in Guyana, which America does have operations there, and which, again, Venezuela claims ownership over and has actually been giving a lot of trouble to. My assumption is it's related to this. But you will likely see this expand. There's been talk that after Venezuela, Trump could shift his focus either to Colombia or to Mexico or to both. And Mexico, of course, and as well as Canada, actually, being major sources of fentanyl also, with the cartels and gangs running the show. Now, look, also speaking of Trump and the White House, the Department of Justice under former President Joe Biden, you might remember they raided Mar-a-Lago. They raided Trump's home. This was right before the 2024 election, right before Trump came out and announced he was running. And many people suspected that this was meant to basically make it harder for Trump to run for office. It was when all the candidates on the Republican side were just about to announce, hey, I'm running for president. They raid Mar-a-Lago. Afterwards, they raid Mar-a-Lago. It actually ironically helped Trump in the polls. In fact, Ron DeSantis, who was running for president at the time, again, you know, governor of Florida, he actually says that the raid on Mar-a-Lago actually kind of stole his campaign from him because it just shifted all the focus to Trump. Trump did not drop out as many thought he would, and of course has now become president of the United States yet again. But the raid on Mar-a-Lago, it turns out, that was done without proper legal backing. It turns out they raided Trump's home in a way that with most people would have made them drop out of the elections. Drop out totally. Trump didn't, but most people would have. They did that without having the proper things to even get a warrant. This changes basically the entire narrative. Just the News said this. They actually got the memo. They say, the FBI in summer 2022 raised repeated objections to raiding Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago home in Florida, warning agents did not believe the Biden Justice Department had enough evidence to establish probable cause that the then former president had broken the law in handling classified documents, according to bombshell memos turned over Tuesday to Congress and turned over now to the media, which I'll read to you now. It says this: WFO, that's the FBI's Washington field office, has conducted approximately, redacted, they don't tell you, interviews related to this matter. Very little has been developed related to who might be culpable for mishandling the documents, meaning it might not have been Trump. A June 1st, 2022 FBI memo declared. They say, quote, from the interviews, WFO, again, the Washington field office, has gathered information suggesting that there may be additional boxes. Remember, they stole all the boxes, presumably of the same type as were sent back to NARA, National Archives, in January at Mar-a-Lago. They say, quote, WFO has been drafting a search warrant affidavit related to these potential boxes, but has some concerns that the information is single source, has not been corroborated, and may be dated. One guy said, cannot prove it, cannot corroborate it, and maybe too old. It says DOJ CES, it's a counterintelligence and export control section, opines, however, that the SW search warrants meet the probable cause standard that memo read. Meaning, again, the counterintelligence export control section, they say that it's enough to have probable cause, but there were doubts about it. It notes that over a month later, FBI agents raised more concerns, including about the legality of searching Trump's personal residence at the Mar-a-Lago residence, the memos show. And it says, quote, DOJ has inquired as to an ops plan for SW at MAL, Mar-a-Lago. I let them know we are not in agreement for PC, probable cause, on the SW search warrant, and that we already had an ops plan in place that will, they say, can be quickly updated between FBI/MM, Miami field office, and FBI WF, Washington field office. A redacted FBI agent in the nation's capital wrote in the July 12, 2022 email. And they say, quote, however, the Washington field office, redacted, does not believe we have probable cause for the 45 office or the bedroom due to recency and issues of boxes versus classified information, which they again raided. They did do that in the end. It says, therefore, as we are in disagreement to the, again, scope, right, this warrant, search warrant, it says we are not yet finalizing a search warrant as we are missing relevant logistics and details. Now, this is not just a rumor anymore. This has been directly confirmed, the validity of this, directly confirmed by the FBI, by the Justice Department. FBI Director Kash Patel wrote this. He said, it's true. We just turned over documents to Capitol Hill to be made public showing the FBI told DOJ they did not have probable cause for raiding President Trump's home in Mar-a-Lago, but DOJ didn't give a dang and did it anyway. That is big. That is big. And of course, the big question also, was Biden involved with that? Did he give the green light? Was this special counsel Jack Smith, who's facing a lot of pressure and investigations right now, did he give the green light? Hey, we don't have the evidence needed to get a warrant. Do it anyway. Hey, we can't legally do this. Do it anyway. That's a big deal. Now, typically, probable cause. Okay, so if an officer wants to search you, typically, they need to have probable cause. It could be, for example, they're searching for a suspect. There's enough evidence tying you to that suspect. They can stop you, talk to you. They need to have some kind of reason to search you, and there are certain legalities for those reasons. Same thing with, for example, going into your home. Typically, if they say, hey, can I come inside? I need to look for something. If you can ask, well, do you have probable cause? And if they say no, but I kind of want to come in, you can tell them, well, I'd rather you not. Because again, they need probable cause or a warrant. If you ask, well, do you have probable cause? They say, yeah, I do. Then you better let them in or you're going to get yourself in trouble. So, but probable cause is necessary. And the fact that they would do something so massive is to raid the home of the former president, who then became, again, the leading candidate and did this all at a time that was very politically sensitive, right as candidates were announcing their run for president. If this turns out to have been a political operation and not a legal operation, that borderlines on what Trump has been talking about, like possible sedition, possible attempts to overthrow the American government from using these types of things, or at the very least to undermine severely the basic process whereby we conduct elections, which is against the Constitution itself. This is a massive deal. Now, on that front also, this is my personal take. I believe that these documents provided may have been in what the FBI refers to as the burn bags. You might remember FBI Director Kash Patel came out, as did Pam Bondi, and they said that they found these burn bags. There was evidence related to the Trump investigations, related to these cases, related to, all that stuff that was in bags designated to be destroyed. Kash Patel came out and said, hey, we found them, we found all this evidence, and he said recently they're going to start showing it to the public. My personal assumption is that the providing of these documents to Congress is related to a public disclosure which was promised of those documents. And we could assume there's a lot more than just these few paragraphs I just read you. We will very likely see this as it goes to Congress. This will also be a big deal, again, going into the midterm elections. We'll see what happens, but that will go into it. But it does seem that Trump is anticipating possibly losing the House, not the Senate, but possibly the House, meaning the investigative arms, meaning they have a time limit for a lot of this. If they want to show it through Congress and congressional investigations, they need to do it now. Otherwise, the clock's going to run out on them. Now, look, also speaking of legal challenges with American politics, the Pentagon is now expanding its investigations into Senator Mark Kelly, who you might remember was involved in the Democrat video where they were urging U.S. troops to disobey what they claim was illegal orders. What were the illegal orders? They never said. When Kelly was pushed on this, hey, which orders are we referring to? He admitted there were none. So the question was, well, why did you make a video telling troops to disobey illegal orders when you didn't know of any illegal orders? And if there were no illegal orders by your own admission, then were you just calling for them to question legal orders? That is the case now in front of us. Now, Breitbart said this. It says the Department of War is escalating its review of Senator Mark Kelly because they're investigating him right now because he's a retired Navy captain, to an official command investigation into his participation in a video dubbed seditious by President Donald Trump and War Secretary Pete Hegseth. Now, on this front, he's no longer with the military, right? He's out, he's a veteran, he's retired. But there's a special little power the military can use to kind of bring you back in for a little bit. They did this to him. So they brought him back into service to launch a criminal investigation through the military itself. President Donald Trump is accusing him and others in that video of sedition. And Trump said that's the death penalty. Would they execute an American senator? Personally, I don't think we'd ever see that happen. But I think the investigation on this will be more politically advantageous than harmful to Trump. We'll see where it goes. It says here as well, though, Department of War officials announced the preliminary review on November 24th in response to a video he published with fellow Democrat lawmakers calling on military service members and intelligence officials to, quote, refuse illegal orders from the Trump administration. Further in it says a Department of War official confirmed the probe has been escalated in a Monday evening statement to Breitbart News and saying, quote, the Office of the Secretary of War in conjunction with the Department of War's Office of the General Counsel is escalating the preliminary review of Captain Mark Kelly, U.S. Navy retired, to an official command investigation, meaning they probably found probable cause to escalate, meaning they probably have something. It says retired Captain Kelly is currently under investigation for serious allegations of misconduct. Further official comments will be limited or to preserve the integrity of the proceedings. Now, I will note as well, an investigation typically is not limited to the scope of a single issue. If you're a government official and you get investigated for problems with real estate holdings. They're not just going to investigate that one house. They will look into your finances, they'll look into your communications, they'll look into you. And if you were engaged in other criminality or similar issues, they're probably going to find it. I would say it's the same thing in this case. Very likely what you're watching now, look, a military investigation is going to give you a lot harder time than a civilian court investigation. If you're dealing with a court-martial, you're going to wish you were sitting in front of a little like district judge. They're much less forgiving. Let's put it that way. A military and criminal investigation is going to ruin your day. And so if there's anything possibly incriminating, the last thing you would want to do is undergo a military investigation. And so very likely the scope of this will not be limited to just that one little video. Because the allegation from Trump and from the Secretary of War, right, Secretary of Defense, meaning the guy in charge, and Trump being the commander-in-chief of the military, if the commander-in-chief accuses you of sedition, what does that mean? It means the investigation is going to be on sedition, probably. And look, it's going to be a lot harder to bring criminal charges of sedition in normal civilian courts. It's going to be a lot easier in the military. That's why this matters so much. And if they're carrying out investigations like that, are you guilty of sedition? They need to look into criminal intent of sedition, which means probably all of your communications, probably everything you've ever sent. And even more so, if you're facing a normal criminal investigation, you're dealing with police and investigators, maybe at the worst you're dealing with, federal prosecutors. You're not going to be dealing with military intelligence going in and looking at probably encrypted communications. The scope of what a military investigation could get, especially as it relates to sedition, gets much broader because it ties into national intelligence and national security. My assumption would be they could potentially even recover what would be like encrypted communications, possibly even deleted communications. If you're dealing with a military investigation related to sedition, because it would include national security concerns, meaning you're going to be investigated by like actual probably military intelligence agents. Like you're not going to have a good time facing that. We'll see where it goes. But also another topic, several major companies are now being sued in Texas. And this is a big one as well, because they're allegedly tied in with Chinese Communist Party spy operations. Be talking about more after we come back from a quick break.
All right, just to pause here for a super quick moment. You are, of course, watching Crossroads with Joshua Philipp. I'm just here to share a message about American Hartford Gold, my own personal gold and silver bullion dealer. Now, obviously, the recent tariffs have made the markets super turbulent and volatile. With every new piece of tariff news, the markets seem to either crash up or crash down. And of course, it's worth mentioning that these conditions don't only affect Wall Street. They affect all of us through our investments and our retirement accounts. That's why I'd like to introduce you to a company that I trust and I myself use to secure my own savings, American Hartford Gold. They specialize in helping Americans move our assets into something tangible, into something you can actually hold, which is physical gold and physical silver, two precious metals that act as a hedge against all those decisions being made in Washington, D.C. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They have thousands of 5-star reviews, and they make the whole buying process super simple. Your metals can be shipped directly to your door, or you can transfer your current retirement account to a tax-advantaged gold IRA. And the best part is that right now, American Hartford Gold is offering an exclusive offer. When you call them today and you mention the name Joshua, you could receive up to $15,000 in free silver with your initial investment. Take advantage of their special offer. You can either just call them at 877-260-2764 or text Joshua to 65532. All their information will also be down in the description box below. And now, back to Crossroads.
Welcome back. Briefly, I want to mention one more thing on the last story related to Mark Kelly being investigated. This is also a big deal because if your communications are under investigation, what does that also mean? If you're communicating with someone, it means the other individual will be part of that investigation as well. meaning a military investigation of potential sedition related to someone telling troops to disobey illegal orders. The scope of the investigation will likely not only include communications, encrypted communications, maybe even deleted communications, but will very also likely branch out into the communications with others related to that, and from there possibly even further. A military investigation into one person, Senator Mark Kelly in this place, will likely expand into a criminal investigation to everybody he's been talking to, basically. Very big deal. Now look, another topic though. Several major companies are now being sued in Texas for illegally spying, allegedly, tied in with the Chinese Communist Party. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton said that he filed suit against 5 major television companies for spying on Texans by secretly recording what consumers watch in their own homes. Now that's a big deal. Imagine you're like watching TV or watching something you probably shouldn't be watching, and the companies are recording you and maybe sending it to China. That's a big deal. And these are not minor companies. It says the 5 major corporations being sued are as follows: Sony, China, again Japanese, Samsung, LG, you're talking again Korean, South Korean, as well as Hisense and TCL Technology Group Corporation, which are both based in China. That's a big deal. It's a very big deal. Samsung, LG, if you've watched my investigations when I was doing reporting on the ground in South Korea, I noted South Korea is very deeply infiltrated by the Chinese Communist Party. I said pretty bluntly that I believe that if they don't do something of it, they're going to become a proxy state of the CCP. They're an inch away from it already. They're extremely compromised by the Chinese Communist Party, and a lot of their businesses are deeply, deeply compromised by the CCP. They're an inch away from losing their country and becoming a puppet state. The fact that Samsung and LG are now being investigated in Texas for potential spying for the Chinese Communist Party is a big deal. Again, look, innocent till proven guilty. This is just the announcement of the investigation, so we don't know if it's true or not. But this is what Ken Paxton says in Texas. It says these Chinese ties pose serious concerns about consumer data harvesting and are exacerbated by China's national security law, which we've talked about before, which says gives its government the capability to get its hands on U.S. consumer data. That's a big deal because that is something even American companies do. Let me explain. What is China's national security law? Anybody who's watched Crossroads for a while knows I've talked about it quite a bit. The national security law states all data has to be securable and controllable by the Chinese Communist Party. What does that mean? If you're a Chinese company, or if you're an American company, or a Korean company, or a Japanese company, or whatever other company, and you work with China, if you work there, every single piece of data needs to be viewable by the Chinese Communist Party and controllable by the Chinese Communist Party. That means social networks that turn around and harvest your data and sell it, because if it's a free product, you're the product. When they sell it to other companies, which most of them do, and a Chinese company buys it, that Chinese company buying your data means that Chinese intelligence services get your data. A lot of them do it. Most of them do it, in fact. It means that if you're a major media corporation, and there's a lot of them, by the way, that work in China, and you work in China, all the data you have, anything stored, anything there, needs to be handed over to the CCP, at least partially. The fact now that the state of Texas is criminally investigating 5 major corporations, Japanese, Korean, South Korean, and Chinese, for this, it's massive, but this could even include American companies if they really want to do it. This could include American companies if they really want to do it. Continues stating this, though. These companies have been unlawfully collecting personal data through automated content recognition, ACR technology. And it's an ACR, in its simplest term, is an uninvited, invisible digital invader. The software can capture screenshots of a user's television display every 500 milliseconds, meaning high definition video recording. Monitor viewing activity in real time, everything you're watching. And people have digital TVs now, which means they can watch just about anything on the internet as well. And transmit that information back to the company without the user's knowledge or consent. You don't agree to it. That's a big deal. It says the companies then sell that consumer information to target ads across platforms for a profit. As I mentioned, a lot of big corporations steal your data. They harvest your data. Some of them do it without asking you. Some of you agree to. That's kind of your own fault, unfortunately. Right? We all do it. There's just no way around it. But if they do it without asking, if they do it without your knowledge, and they sell it to a foreign hostile government or a company that works for a foreign hostile government or merely works in the country of that government, and the laws of that government require national intelligence services like secret agents to get access to all of it, that's a national security threat. That's a violation of your privacy. That's a big deal. And if they go after the companies and say you're complicit in this, that's no minor thing. Now it says as well, quote, this technology puts users' privacy and sensitive information such as passwords, bank information, and other personal information at risk. When you're dealing with the Chinese Communist Party, they can pass over passwords, bank information, personal information to scammers, to the mafia, because the CCP is a mafia state. They work with criminals. They work with the cartels. They do the money laundering for them and supply the precursor chemicals. They also work with things like the snakeheads, the human traffickers. They also work with the triads, the Chinese drug agents in the United States, and the mafia here. And a lot of those organizations carry out operations as foot soldiers for the CCP. They also run scam networks, meaning this could mean that they don't just spy on you. It could mean that they're hacking you, stealing stuff from you, scamming you, stealing banking information from you, or using this for international operations, targeting major corporations, military officers, anything. This is a major national security breach. I would actually add to this. The picture is worse than this because I'm aware of much of what's going on. There's also something else. Major Chinese corporations. Let's talk about Tencent, which has been buying up the video game market here in the United States and in Canada and elsewhere. If you're an American soldier and you download a Chinese video game or a video game that gets bought up by a Chinese corporation, one of these corporations runs something called ACE, Anti-Cheat Expert. That program, anti-cheat software, has access to monitor parts of your device, your computer or your phone, so deep that even you cannot access it. If you say, uh-oh, I'm in trouble, and you delete said video game, it does not delete that spying system. It remains on your device. There are ways you can do it by going into your terminal, and you have to remove it from your terminal. Even then, I don't know if it fully gets rid of it. This is a massive national security risk to the United States, and I don't know why it's not being talked about more. The amount of data harvesting, surveillance, and other such things being done by major Chinese corporations on through American devices being allowed on our app markets could represent they don't even need to hack you, they just access it. It's like you give them backdoor access to your device. The degree of this cannot be understated. And so the fact that Texas is now actually looking into this is a big deal. We'll have to see whether the federal government does similar investigations, but Texas doing it is a very big deal. Now, look, also on the point of potentially illicit China ties, it turns out that Meta being Facebook and Instagram and others, was allowing Chinese fraudulent advertisement on its platforms. And Reuters says this. Last year, Meta had to reckon with an ugly conclusion about its China advertising customers. They were defrauding Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp users worldwide. Massive fraud carried out against you and others on these social networking communication platforms. It says, though China's authoritarian government bans use of Meta social media by its citizens, Beijing lets Chinese companies advertise to foreign consumers on the globe-spanning platforms. It says, as a result, Meta advertising business was thriving in China. You can't use it, but you can scam people on it, ultimately reaching over $18 billion in annual sales in 2024, more than a tenth of the company's global revenue. It's a lot of money to lose for Meta, by the way, which they might lose now if it turns out that it was fraudulent and people are being scammed, and maybe you can sue them for it. It says, but Meta calculated that about 19% of that money, more than $3 billion, was coming from ads for scams, illegal gambling, pornography, and other banned content, according to internal Meta documents reviewed by Reuters, meaning they knew, meaning they looked into it. And the question is, did they stop it after they came to the conclusion? It says the documents are part of a cache of previously unreported material generated over the past 4 years by teams including Meta's finance, lobbying, engineering, and safety divisions. And it says the cache reveals Meta's efforts over that period to understand the scale of abuse on its platforms and the company's reluctance to introduce fixes that could undermine its business and revenues, such as losing maybe a tenth of its market, its ad revenue, or maybe getting sued by people who got scammed. Who knows? It says this. The documents show that Meta believed China was the country of origin of roughly a quarter of all ads for scams in banned products on Meta's platforms worldwide. Victims range from shoppers in Taiwan who purchase bogus health supplements to investors in the United States and Canada who were swindled out of their savings. It says, quote, we need to make significant investments to reduce growing harm. Meta staffers warned in an internal April 2024 presentation to leaders of its safety operations. And it notes basically to that end, Meta created an anti-fraud team that went beyond previous efforts to monitor scams and other banned activity from China. Using a variety of stepped-up enforcement tools that slashed the problematic ads by about half during the second half of 2024. That's still a lot of fraud, by the way. It says from 19% to 9% of the total advertising revenue coming from China. They're still allowing it seems, but they've cut it in half. That's still a massive amount of fraud. So be careful of those ads if you're watching this on it. Speaking of other countries causing issues for the United States, well, Mexico has for a long time been dumping raw sewage into American waters and has now agreed to kind of take steps to stop doing it. Now, the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, said this, quote, today, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, is announcing the signing of a historic new agreement between the United States and Mexico called Minute 333, marking additional significant progress to permanently and urgently end the decades-long Tijuana River sewage crisis. The crisis being that they just release it into the United States, or release it mostly into the ocean and it washes upshore. It says the U.S. and Mexican sections of the International Boundary and Water Commission agreed to a list of new actions, including infrastructure projects, research, enhanced monitoring, and planning for operations and maintenance of critical sites and systems that will account for future population growth in Tijuana, a key component that was missing from previous agreements made prior to the Trump administration. It notes the Tijuana River sewage crisis is a decades-long issue. I can affirm this because I'm from Southern California, where untreated raw sewage has flowed into Southern California from Mexico, meaning just raw sewage. This has resulted, it says, in years-long beach closures, foul odors, degradation of the Tijuana River Valley, and lost economic opportunity, while also sickening people on both sides of the border. This crisis has also impacted our Navy SEALs who train in the area. So, I'm from Southern California, right? I mainly lived, I grew up all over the place, but I used to live in Spring Valley area. So the Navy SEALs training base is in Coronado. You go across the Coronado Bridge, it's right there. They're susceptible to that, but there's a lot more areas that are susceptible. So my old surfing spot growing up was Sunset Cliffs, kind of close to the border, and it used to get closed all the time because of raw sewage from Tijuana. This has been going on since I was a kid. This is an old problem, and really Mexico has not gotten a lot of pressure on it. They just been doing it. They just release raw sewage, and the way the water flows, it goes north right into America. They actually stopped doing this to an extent recently because of pressure from Trump, and that is caused basically because they don't have the infrastructure in Tijuana, in Mexico. They don't have the infrastructure to deal with it, and so it's caused like overflowing raw sewage all around parts of Tijuana. So it's nice that the United States is working on this with Mexico now, saying, okay, let's actually fix your infrastructure so you don't either have to flood your own country with raw sewage or dump it into our water and close our beaches and make Americans sick, including Navy SEALs apparently, because it went as far north as again, Coronado. Which, by that bridge, by the way, is where one of the big naval bases is. So that's a big deal for the United States. It's interesting they're now fixing it. We'll see what happens. They're taking steps they're probably going to have to build the infrastructure. It's going to take a while, I assume. But also, in terms of foreign countries, Donald Trump is not happy with the good old British, at least not their state media. And Donald Trump has now expanded a lawsuit against the BBC, British Broadcasting Corporation, state-run, to $10 billion. Some Dr. Evil tier stuff right there. And the media company is now being accused of even using AI to manufacture false quotes. This is Donald Trump speaking about this during a press conference on Tuesday. Watch this.
In a little while, you'll be seeing I'm suing the BBC for putting words in my mouth, literally. They put words in my mouth. They had me saying things that I never said coming out. I guess they used AI or something. So we'll be bringing that lawsuit. A lot of people are asking, when are you bringing that lawsuit? Even the media can't believe that one. They actually put terrible words in my mouth having to do with January 6th that I didn't say. And the beautiful words that I said, right? The beautiful words, talking about patriotism and all of the good things that I said. They didn't say that, but they put terrible words. They actually have me speaking with words that I never said, and they got caught because I believe somebody at BBC said, this is so bad, it has to be reported. Let's go fake news. So we'll be filing that suit probably this afternoon or tomorrow morning.
Now, a bit more on that lawsuit. This is Breitbart talking about it. They said, President Donald Trump on Monday filed a lawsuit seeking at least $10 billion from the BBC over a documentary that edited his January 6, 2020 address ahead of the U.S. Capitol riot. Now, they did this notably about January 6, but they did it right before the American elections in 2024, meaning the UK, through a state media, did a documentary falsifying quotes of the then leading presidential candidate and the winner in such a way that made it appear he called for violence, and they did it right before our election. It says the speech and doctored edits in question aired in a Panorama documentary. It says Trump accused the broadcaster of defamation and of violating a trade practices law, according to documents filed in federal court in Miami, as seen and reported by the BBC. It notes the BBC apologized to Trump last month, meaning they kind of admitted guilt, over the bungled report, but rejected his demands for compensation. It says the broadcaster said it had investigated itself and acknowledged the edit had given the mistaken impression he had made a direct call for violent action, but disagreed there was basis for a defamation claim. Basically, what they did, when Donald Trump was speaking at the Ellipse on January 6, prior to the whole Capitol riot problem, a bit of context to this, and this is totally just not even talked about these days, there was a scheduled speaking event at the Capitol on January 6. They had a speaker platform set up. They had scheduled speakers. What was supposed to happen is there was going to be an event at the Ellipse, the Washington Monument, where, again, Trump was speaking at this time. Then the event was going to go to the Capitol building. Scheduled, permitted, everything in place. It was legal. They even had a speaker platform. It was all set up. Then the pipe bomb shut it all down. Pipe bomb's going to be a big deal as we go forward with this. And the problem was when Trump was also speaking at the Ellipse, a handful of individuals went to the Capitol building, tore down all the no trespassing signs, tore down the little bicycle racks because they declined to have no climb fences put up or riot police or anything else, which Trump asked for and they didn't do it. And then also didn't equip the police with anything near what they needed to deal with that, including riot gear or like gas masks, because a lot of them gassed themselves by throwing the smoke bombs. And then they were downwind of it. Total disaster. But what was supposed to happen that day was this. Trump was going to speak at the Ellipse. And I was there reporting all day as a journalist. Okay, I was there all day as a journalist. So I remember, right? I was there. Speak at the Ellipse, move to the speaking event at the Capitol. And what Trump wanted and was publicly stated is that members of Congress, the Republicans, were supposed to read every piece of evidence they had of alleged voter fraud. That was what was supposed to happen that day. That was what Trump wanted. To this day, we've not seen that evidence. To this day, we don't even know what they found. Because after that, anybody who talked about it got sued, censored, or whatever else. That was what was supposed to happen on January 6th. It was not in Trump's interest, based the whole thing being shut down. It was not in his interest. What the BBC did was while Trump was speaking at the Ellipse, he said, we're going to go to the Capitol. I want you to go to the Capitol, something along those lines. And they took that, right? The original quote was something like, we're going to go to the Capitol and make our voices heard. BBC took the first half of that quote, we're going to go to the Capitol, and skipped over 50 minutes forward in the speech. Over 50 minutes. And took a second half of a quote and then merged those 2 points together to make it say, we're going to go, I want you to go to the Capitol or go to the Capitol and fight like hell. It took fight like hell over 50 minutes in and spliced it together with the reason for going to the Capitol and made a false quote that appeared to be a call for violence. That's what they did. And Trump is going to sue them now for, they say, at least $10 billion. Now you might say, how can an American, well, president in this case, or at the time, he was still president. He was not yet a private citizen. How can the president sue a foreign state-run media? Because, it is a little complicated. The UK is trying to do it all the time to Americans. That might be why Trump is doing it, because if the UK says, well, you can't sue us for $10 billion because you have no power here, you have no jurisdiction, that could stop it. But by stating that, especially with a state-run media company, BBC, by stating that, they would have to admit the issue of jurisdiction, which they don't have either. Meaning them suing American companies, doing all this stuff, they would basically destroy their own legal basis for a lot of their actions if they went that route. But BBC has another problem, which is they air through American companies, including public broadcasting, which is why as part of these investigations and possible, we'll see where Trump goes with it, you even have a lot of American broadcasters at least swept up in the investigations, if not the lawsuits, as part of this. And so, not a good day for the British, I'll tell you that. This is almost as bad as them losing all their tea in Boston Harbor. It's a big deal for them. All right, folks, everyone, if you have questions, comments, anything you want to talk about, leave it in the chat. Let's jump into some discussions. All right. Let's see here. First question, Denise B. You're saying, I think Trump is proceeding to sue the BBC because they haven't yet admitted that what they did was wrong. They kept using words like accidental, unfortunate, mistaken to lessen the seriousness of what they did. Yeah, well, Trump is going to sort it, as the British might say. He's going to sort it, and we will see what the sorting results in, actually. Yeah. I actually think it's for a couple reasons why. I mean, I think you're probably right. I think he does want to hold him accountable. This could amount to election interference. And, the UK is in trouble on this because what else did the UK interfere with? Well, back in 2016, what did they do? former British spy, worked and created the Steele dossier, which created the whole Trump-Russia false narrative. And it seems that there was some involvement, at least through that, with the United Kingdom. So if the UK was involved with interfering with 2 American elections, both related to Trump, first of all in 2016, which also had ripple effects throughout Trump's entire first term in office and even into 2020, and massively, I'd say, interfered with the midterm elections in Trump's first term. Going into the second grand interference with America's elections, which was the false framing of Trump's quote in a documentary right ahead of the 2024 elections and even aired through American networks, that is 2 instances. You could argue the government wasn't involved, but related to the UK at least. BBC, it is kind of related to the government because they're state-run, right? If you're in the UK, you have to use. They take tax money to pay for it. You have no choice. A lot of people complain about it. This is 2 instances of the UK allowing for interference in America's elections, and which is a big deal. Now, I don't know if Trump's going to go so far as to accuse him of that, but I do think it should be viewed in terms of the broader picture, because the FBI is now looking into that. The DOJ is now looking into it. They're looking at a type of grand conspiracy, tying in everything from 2016 all through 2024. Look, a decade. We're almost a decade in with this, or we probably will be by the time the case is wrapped up. Like the decade of Trump. Some people liked it, some people hated it. But the decade of Trump also included a decade of scandal, and the scandal is being framed now as a meta-conspiracy. The attempts to remove Trump from office, the falsification of information, the Trump-Russia hoax, the raid on Mar-a-Lago, the special counsels investigating him, the attempts to impeach the sitting president using false information, which you could even frame as a palace coup, an attempted coup d'etat from within, right? Because if you initiate an operation to remove the President of the United States by collaborating, falsifying evidence, using falsified evidence to launch fraudulent investigations, then using those fraudulent investigations to swing votes by influencing voters, and also to launch operations for impeachment to remove him, that's not much different from assassination. The difference being you kill him, but the agenda to remove from a position is the same. To overthrow the President of the United States is the same. Now, they're not framing it as that, but they are discussing it on that tier. A grand conspiracy to basically overturn the guy Americans voted for. A conspiracy against the Constitution itself, if you want to paint it on those grounds. That's a very big deal. And if you had foreign involvement in it, which you did, that's an even bigger deal. Now, we'll see what this means in terms of the lawsuit. I will add one important point. If you're sued for defamation, what does that also mean? If the BBC is sued for defamation, what does that mean? It means discovery. It means discovery. What does discovery mean? It means that all of the communications of anybody within that company will now be available for public disclosure and for criminal investigation, unless the BBC wants to settle with Trump on a at least $10 billion lawsuit. That's a lot of money. They're going to have to fine Facebook a lot to make up for that, They're going to have to really place a lot of fines on X to make up for that $10 billion. But what that means is this. So do any of you remember what happened with Tucker Carlson and Fox News when they were being sued as related to like the whole, allegations around voter fraud and so on? When they were investigated, right, not criminal, but as part of the discovery for defamation, internal communications, including of individual journalists, were granted access to the investigators and made public. That was how Tucker Carlson, of course, got pushed out of Fox News. Tucker Carlson tonight, and then launched his own thing, which probably worked out better for him, honestly. That was how it turned out that people were seeing all the communications and videos of the TV hosts and what they were saying off record when the cameras were still rolling, but they were not broadcasting. It turned into embarrassments for the company. It turned into exposure of things they really didn't want to get exposed. The same thing could happen to the BBC if this is allowed. And so if Trump goes to discovery and does not settle, that also means any kind of internal communications at the BBC. And remember, they're a state-run broadcaster, so there might even be government communications. All of that will now be up for discovery. All of that will now be part of this investigation. My personal assumption is that Trump is aware of this, the British are aware of it, and the British are aware that Trump is aware that they're aware. And if they allow it to go that far, it's going to be very bad for them. My assumption is they're going to settle and take this as a we know that you know that we know type thing, and they're not going to move on with it. That's my personal assumption, but we shall see. Because Trump is planning, it seems, to sort it, as they would say. JA2559088, you're saying, this is a brilliant plan. You're talking about the designation of fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction. Selling fentanyl now will be like selling a nuclear bomb, same difference, a weapon of mass destruction. Yeah, I mean, you could even think, maybe not in a major city, but if you were to drop a nuclear bomb, what would the death toll be? Like, you think like a smaller one. Yeah, that's a weapon of mass destruction. If you have literal hundreds of thousands of people killed through the use of a substance, if America were to fall victim to a biological warfare attack, you might have millions die, you might have hundreds of thousands die. Fentanyl is killing hundreds of thousands of Americans, or has killed hundreds of thousands of Americans, and future potential risk probably even higher than that. Technically, I would say legally, which I think is the backing of this, fentanyl has the capacity of mass death on par with a weapon of mass destruction. I do believe it's an accurate designation. This also makes it very hard for Mexico to say, well, America, it's your fault for buying it. Yeah, we don't like the cartels, but if you try to go after the cartels, we're going to stop you because we don't think you should go after them because it's not nice to kill them. They can kill you, but it's mean if you kill them. It doesn't look good on them. It also means any organization involved with money laundering, any organization involved with trafficking. At the southern border, a lot of this is gangs. A lot of it is cartels. At the northern border, it's actually a lot of biker gangs. Anyone know this? There's a lot of biker gangs that do the Canadian operations. Not all. There's cartels there too, but biker gangs do a lot of the northern stuff for some reason. Turns out Canada has kind of like the new El Chapo. Literally a former snowboarding, like Olympic snowboarder, which is very Canadian, by the way, being like your new El Chapo kingpin for fentanyl. This is going to be big. And again, China provides the precursors. China provides the finished products. China does the money laundering. China helps with a lot of stuff. And it's done through Chinese state banks and allowed for by the CCP. So, this is a massive deal. The other thing you're going to have to deal with, though, is, especially when dealing with synthetic drugs, you can manufacture alternatives very easily that fall outside of legal definitions. So if they regulate fentanyl, they can change a few molecules because it's a synthetic drug. It's like lab made. You can change a few molecules and get around the legal definition of what fentanyl is. So they have, for example, already carfentanil, which is even worse than fentanyl, and which Narcan can't save you from. The hit with Narcan, I've talked to police officers. If someone ODs on fentanyl, they look like they're dead. They're like turning purple, they're laying on the ground, they're not breathing. They look dead. You hit them with Narcan, and it's like watching Dracula rise from his grave. They just go like this, and they're fully conscious, like nothing ever happened, talking normal. Or sometimes in a crack addict, like rage fighting with you, which police have to deal with, by the way. They're like, maybe I should have waited a bit before I hit you with that. Police deal with this stuff. Narcan is crazy like that. But Narcan will not save you from carfentanil, apparently. And so they're manufacturing even more deadly versions of it. My personal hope is that the designation of fentanyl as a WMD includes the possible variants, and they could probably find a way to legally do that, including variants is part of the designation, or maybe define it by scale of lethality or something like that. If they did something like that, I think they could include it. LibWorks186, you're saying, we were the ones who taught China how to do this with our involvement with the British and the opioid wars. So that is true. The Chinese Communist Party actually modeled the drug war against the United States after the Opium War. America was not involved in the first, they were involved in the second Opium War, but a lot of it was done through private businesses. Not giving excuses for it. You're talking about history over 100 years ago. The issue is, of course, the Chinese Communist, well, a lot more than 100 years ago. But you're talking like slave era type stuff, right? A lot's changed since the 1800s. And then, of course, America fought and died to protect the Chinese from being slaughtered by the Japanese also. So I think maybe we made up for it. And then built their entire economy, by the way, with foreign investment, for better or for worse. It's true, though. So Mao Zedong actually modeled the drug war against the United States using what was learned from the Opium Wars. The difference is it's kind of hard to OD and kill yourself on opium. It's very easy to OD and kill yourself on fentanyl. China is carrying out operations under the Chinese Communist Party of mass death. And not only that, they're using drugs as ways to basically destabilize entire regions of the world and gain political power. Drugs are not just about money. This is something you won't hear talked about often. Drugs are not really about money. Drugs are tools. They're tools of culture war, and they're tools of political subversion. You can take over a country by using drugs to do it. And the way it works is this. So what Mao Zedong did, he went to Fidel Castro in Cuba. And Cuba had, although militarily they're very weak, in terms of intelligence networks and in terms of their influence on the Latin American communist fronts, they're very influential. So Cuba was able to infiltrate a lot of Latin American countries, political circles, narco-terrorist organizations, terrorist organizations, and a lot of the communist revolutionaries in Latin America, like, trained in China. There were a lot of them. Most are Maoist. A lot of them were trained in China. Some in Russia, but mostly China. A lot of them financed their operations using drugs. So by increasing the drug trade, and then by using intelligence networks to infiltrate, subvert, manufacture political movements, this is what it did. The cartels do the drug trade, international support, training, so on. They then start getting political candidates, right? You have a guy who works for the cartel, run for governor. You have a guy who works for the cartel, run for sheriff, run for office, run for president of an entire country, or form a political party they choose when they want. What then happens? You have a public official or a candidate running for office who's part of the cartel. What do they then do? Well, they kill the opposition. Simple. Now, what happens if you have 5 mayoral candidates, you murder 2 of them, 2 drop out, you're left with 1. And the 1 remaining guy is the guy who works for the cartels. What then happens? That guy gets elected because he's your only option. What happens when he gets elected? He legalizes the drug trade, or he decriminalizes it, or he passes laws that prevents proper law enforcement, or blocks law enforcement, like you see happening in Mexico right now, by the way. From there, they then expand it. And as they expand it, they're able to, again, because they've legalized or allowed the drug trade, what does that mean? It means more money, less risk, bigger business, more cash flow. Cash flows not just into there, but into the economy. Cash flows in local population. Cash flows into the government coffers, but mostly the party coffers of the people tied to it. Then they're able to plant more local candidates. You run for sheriff. You run for this. You run as the local prosecutor. You run for, whatever else. until the cartels effectively have taken over the entire country, all positions of major power. At that point, anybody who stands against them can even face criminal investigations related to even murder or assassination. Once you get that level of power, you have a narco state. A narco state established as a puppet state, a puppet regime of foreign influence. That is what Mao Zedong did. Now, to that point, I'll name a few direct organizations. Lula de la Silva, working with Fidel Castro, established an organization called the Foro ao Sao Paulo, the Forum of Sao Paulo. Most Americans have never heard of this. If you're a Brazilian conservative, you know about it because it's one of the biggest problems they have. The Foro ao Sao Paulo established operations, party backing. They're tied in with FARC. They legalized a lot of the narco-terror operations. They basically wanted to decriminalize drugs. But they also ran a lot of the far-left political parties throughout all of Latin America. And they were the main organization that helped kind of facilitate what they call the pink wave, the socialist and communist takeover of most of Latin America. Hugo Chavez, Venezuela, also working with Fidel Castro. So you have a triad here, Brazil, Venezuela, and China, working through Cuba as the proxy network for this. They did this, and then what they did was they established local intergovernmental organizations to push out the United States, to get rid of the Monroe Doctrine, and Canada, by the way. And from there, established regional networks, and then brought in Chinese money, the Belt and Road Initiative, which the first operations were a lot of the testing grounds for the pilot programs for the Belt and Road Initiative were in Venezuela. So they brought in China, they brought in Russia, they brought in Iran, actually, which actually even has Hezbollah political parties in some countries. Like in Peru, for example, they have a Hezbollah political party. And Hezbollah is very active in Mexico as well, by the way. Creating, effectively, narco-terror states, working as puppets of foreign regimes. Drugs are the tool for this. Drugs are the money for this. Drugs are the method of manufacturing corruption that can then be politically puppeteered. If you want to puppeteer a country, you need to create puppets. Drugs are the tool to create puppets. And that's how they were doing it. And then the mass death they've been importing into the United States, and also exporting criminality, which Trump has been accusing them of, sending gangs, sending cartels, sending criminals, who then come here and do the same thing here. Spreading the method of subversion through black markets into the United States, which can then be puppeteered again, use it by foreign influence, using drugs as the tool, the financial arm to manufacture puppets. Drugs are not just to kill people, but they're that as well. You have more Americans dying from drugs every year than were killed in Vietnam, okay? We're more Americans are dying every single year through this drug war being run by China than were killed in the entire span of the Vietnam War. They're killing more of us than a full-scale war every year. And again, so getting back to this, that is the real nature of drugs. We don't often talk about it like this. They are tools to create puppet states and other things as well. And that's how Mao Zedong did it. So that's really what I would say is going on. And I wish this was talked about more commonly. I do wish this level of perspective was more commonly understood. Anyways, folks, I'm going to be at Turning Point tomorrow. So tune in. I'll be on the road. If you're at Turning Point, stop by the Epoch Times booth. We'd love to see you. I will see you all soon. Join me again tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.